fantastic event today. And I think it does show, I know we're all missing during COVID meeting up, being able to be outside protesting, even though we can protest if we do it socially distanced. It has been a way through online meetings that we've been able to have a bigger reach and a bigger participation from people who may not be being able to travel to our usual trade union conferences and that. And to me, looking forward to the future, I think it's a mix of both, so that when we have our conference next year, Stand Up to Racism, the trade union conference, we should also be in a room together with hundreds and thousands of us if we can, but also we should open that to online as well. This session, the final session, is looking forward to how we can organise for a world against racism and fascism and build a UN Anti-Racism Day on the 20th of March. Before I bring the speakers in, I just wanted to contribute in terms of what we have done previously and what we can do going forward and some of the practical things we can do. In terms of the UN Anti-Racism Day, the last time we had a protest, the CWU, of whom I'm the Vice President, we had a real huge push in our branches that was a priority a demonstration, that we would like to have a huge show of CWU members. And our members come from the telecom side, from postal, from financial services. And we had a marvellous attendance, the biggest attendance we've ever had. You know, I think it was about something like 400 or 500 delegates come down for it and that. But it wasn't just the experience of the day. It's what they went back to their cities with and their towns with. And then when they linked with their local Stand Up to Racism groups, and then have been protesting in their own cities. And that you could see during the Black Lives Matters movement. When you look at that and the people who were out protesting, how diverse it was, it shows how we can come together to change not only our country about racism and fascism, but the whole world. And that, to me, is what COVID has done. It's laid bare what capitalism is around the world. And it's laid bare where racism is and where fascism is rising. And to me, that's all about power and who controls the power of our society. We could see it during the deaths of the first round of the pandemic. You could see it and feel it in your workplaces. I know for me, as the chair of the postal constituency, we did minute silences for all the people we knew had died. And you could tell from that, BAME members were disproportionately affected. And we know that. And we know in unorganised workplaces and precarious work, our BAME communities have been affected massively. But we all as workers together struggle as a class as well. And when you look at what is planned for the future and what people want to do, it's not going to be a fairer society for us, whether it's black or white working class members. It's actually going to be us who pay for the crisis. And it then becomes, what do we do in that opposition? To me, at the moment, the politicians, there is no opposition. And they haven't highlighted what needs to be highlighted. So to me, these events, these activities, these making a difference does matter. And I think people have come together across their communities and their workplaces. And in all the disputes, sometimes that's the best place where you can deal with racism. When you're all united, facing who is the real enemy, and people come together. And we see this around the country now. But as a movement, we need to make sure that what happened during the summer makes a lasting difference and that voices aren't shut down again. To be honest, it's not crumbs for the table that people are asking for. It's asking to be there because you deserve and you have a right to be there. And so to me, this event is important. The trade union conference and then moving on to the Anti-Racism Day. But being anti-racist isn't just for one day. It's what you do with it from there. It's how you're building your union workplaces, how you're building your communities. It's great that all the national unions support the events, but we know there's a difference when in your workplaces you're organising to deliver those events. And this gives us a great opportunity on March the 20th to be out protesting where we can, to be doing stuff that highlights the problems, but uniting together so that we can make sure that we do win. Because we've got to deliver not only anti-racism, but making sure our society is fairer for all. To be honest, I think all of us who've been fighting for numbers of years, we're at that juncture where enough is enough. This will not continue, and the working class will not pay the price for this COVID pandemic. And that means we unite on everything. That means we educate. That means we open our structures. We involve as many people. Unions are not full. They're not full. And we've got more room for them, for people who want to be involved. And that should be our approach all along. So some of the tech that's come out of the pandemic opens our structures. And I'm more than happy with that. Because to me, that's more people fighting in the communities, more people organising people into unions, giving people the confidence to stand up, giving unions the confidence to do what is right, even though it may upset the union culture of how we work. We are one movement and one movement together, and we fight on all fronts. So there's a fantastic lineup for you today. We should be inspired. We know the fight is hard, but we know we can gain many victories. But through that fight and that struggle, we change not only our own circumstances, but the circumstances of the world. Okay, my first speaker is Shaka Hislop. He's an ex-footballer and he does loads of campaigning work, and he has done with the CWU on Show Racism, the Red Card. So I'm going to introduce Shaka and thank him for all his hard work and his continued support. And actually the fight about racism in football is there, and we need to make sure it's kicked off our terraces whenever it appears. Over to you, Shaka.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good day to everybody listening. Thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be here representing Show Racism, the Red Card, given the support that the trade unions have shown to us and given to us in the 25 years of our history. Over the last 25 years, we're proud of the work that we've done and have done in so many of our communities. This is an organization that started alongside Jed Greby, the current CEO, when I just joined Newcastle as a goalkeeper back in 95, 96. For me, it started as an opportunity to give back to a community that I was now representing on the field every single Saturday. I was willfully joined by any number of my teammates. The club supported everything that we did as we went into schools, talking to kids about our own experiences around race, around racism, around our understanding of the diversity that came with the game. As I often say, where else can a young man from Trinidad and Tobago, as I was, sit in a dressing room and be 5 yards away from somebody from Newcastle, Sunderland, from London, from players from Belgium, Georgia, Greece, and even as far away as Colombia. And understanding that for all the differences of our cultures, we were bonded by our sense of team, our sense of humanity. Where else and what better vehicle can you find where, as a team, despite those cultural differences, despite players coming from all four corners of the earth, we go onto a field on Saturday, and if I'm not having a good day, I know I can rely on anybody else out on that field to represent and carry my own burden for me that day. And when I'm having a good day, I know I do exactly the same for them. When we win, we celebrate together. When we lose, we go onto the training ground on Monday and work to put it right. And as much as that's the day-to-day, week-to-week schedule of footballers, I don't think there is a better message as to who we are as human beings and our responsibility to each other and to our communities. Over the last 25 years, probably the question that we're asked most is there still a need for campaigns such as ours? And then 2020 came around and answered that resoundingly. 2020 highlighted so much of what we've taken for granted, as Madam Chair just pointed out, whether it is our frontline workers, our postal workers, so many in the vital industries that keep our cities and our countries ticking over, that have been taken granted for so long, all of a sudden we're called on for yeoman, if not superhero efforts in keeping us alive, in keeping our countries and our communities ticking over. And that's what we saw as well as our own campaign during the course of this year. Despite not being able to offer the kind of workshops that we did pre-pandemic, while we retooled for what has become this new age of these Zoom meetings and on-camera conferences, we look back on 25 years, and the stat that amazed me most, 800, and this is as of November of last year, despite a quiet 2020, 825,000 kids had been through our workshops, receiving at least a full day's work of anti-racism education that they can then take back to their classrooms, to the playgrounds, to their homes, education that empowered them to ask questions about their own understandings, or maybe some of the questions that they may be hearing in their own homes towards race, to empower and encourage those conversations that will change our communities, our way of thinking, and so much of what we continue to take for granted and accept. It's been a long time for us in getting here to this point around racism, and equally, we have to be prepared to have these conversations, to do this work for a long time yet, to redress that balance. But that's no reason for us to shirk those responsibilities of today. Those responsibilities were brought into sharp focus during the course of this year. Early in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement on the wake of the George Floyd killing affected me deeply. And I wasn't quite sure how to address some of those feelings. And just to put it into context, for me, given the issues around Tamir Rice, around Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, brought into focus so much of the concerns of the Black community, so much of my own concerns as a Black man and a Black father. Tamir Rice was only 12 years old when he was shot outside a playground. My wife and my youngest son is now 12 years old, and I could put him in exactly that same situation. I could put any of our daughters into the shoes of Breonna Taylor. My wife and I, we travel with our kids all over the country with our kids' activities. My wife is a realtor now here in the US, and if there's a home under construction, we would pay particular attention. We go for jogs in an effort to keep fit. And you recognize how thin a line it is between Ahmaud Arbery and that story being our own. And that is the big takeaway for me here, the empathy that this moment called for. In an effort to deal with my own disappointment, my own depression around recognizing of those issues, my wife and I joined the Black Lives Matter march in Boston, which is the nearest large city to where we are now. What I realized there, between the youth, the diversity of the crowd, and just being a part of that moment, lifted that gloom. But it despite my being in this work for as long as I have, it showed the value of being present, whether you're on the front lines or just there being counted as we were on that day. It is empowering in a way that I don't think I can fully express. So as we look forward to March 20th, I want that to be everybody's big takeaway from my own experiences, some 25 years in the making, not just around 2020. There is a huge power to being present, to being counted. there is a huge power to continuing to represent our communities, whether it's on the football field on a Saturday or any of the other 6 days of the week. That's our greatest calling. That's the calling of this moment. Let's not let all the work that's gone on before somehow miss us. Be present, be counted. History will tell our story favorably. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Shaka. Excellent contribution, and keep up the good work. And I'm sure if people are more interested, you can go on to Show Racism the Red Card's website and get some more details on that. But obviously, it's important about sport being anti-racist and anti-fascist. Right, in terms of who the next speaker is, it's going to be Petros Constantinou, who's from Greece, and the KEERFA organisation, which is against racism and fascism. Petros has had to move up the agenda of our speakers because he's due to go into quarantine and needs to move house immediately. So thank you, Petros, and solidarity greetings from over in the UK. And it's now over to you to address the conference. Thanks, Petros.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm sorry to change in the order. Quarantine is problematic for all the organization of our processes. First of all, greetings from the Greek anti-fascist and anti-racist movement. We are very proud that last year on 7th of October, the anti-fascist movement had a huge victory. That was the day when 100,000 workers, young people, students demonstrated outside the court where the final decision for Golden Dawn and Nazis was announced. And the decision was, they were condemned as criminal organization for a lot of years in prison, and 40 of them, all the old parliamentary group ended in prison, and also their Führer. That was an astonishing victory of our movement. Of course, it didn't come from thin air. It was a product of a lot of years campaigning against the Nazis, against the fascism. It was a victory very clearly based on the power of the trade unions and the working class in this country. Since I want to remember the people that when the neo-Nazis entered the parliament in 2012 with 7%, 500,000 votes, that was a shock for Greece and for Europe. It was the first neo-Nazi party that was forming battalion groups in the street, and they were attacking, murdering. That was also entering the parliament. They were using the parliamentary way in order to legalize the stormtroops, and that was a terrible threat for the working class movement and for the youth in this country. So when Pavlos Fyssas was murdered in 2013, there was a general strike in Greece, and that general strike played a crucial role with 60,000 demonstrations to their headquarters to force the government to move to the crackdown and to order the investigation of Golden Dawn. When in 2015, this trial started, it was again a general strike by the Public Workers Union that attracted 8 o'clock in the morning, 5,000 demonstrators, and we kick out the neo-Nazis from the street. They couldn't even approach the court room. And on 7th of October, the call for the general strike of a lot of unions and also of the young people during the pandemic attracted 100,000. It was also the power of the trade unions that stood against racism for years. That was the main auspice for the working class and the migrants against the fascists. I want to remember the teachers' union and the hospital workers' union, who stood for the right of the children to go to the school, who stood for the right of all migrants without paper to have treatment, medical treatment in the hospitals. I remember the public TV union that stopped the neo-Nazis of using the platform. So it was step by step how we fought and won this struggle. but also we are living now in the period of pandemic, and our victory doesn't mean that that there is an end to the fascist threat. The fascists are growing because the governments in Europe and around the world are playing the card of racism. They are closing the border. They are opening detention centers. They are canceling the right for asylum. The camps in Greece are really terrible. I mean, you have Moria, or Moria 2, as we call it now. Thousands they are in the camps. The last week, there was a woman who put fire on herself because they didn't want to move here in Europe. They canceled their right to go to Germany. 2 days ago, one child of 8 years lost his life in a fire in a camp because there is no protection. There is nothing in the camps. So this is the life of refugees in this country. And the government is using the rhetoric of Orban, of Trump, even if Trump has been defeated. They are speaking that the migrants and the refugees who are coming in this country, all these thousands of women and children who are victims of war, they are invaders. They are invading Europe, and they are bringing the danger of Islamization. They even argued that they are bringing COVID-19. So all this terrible racism meant that the government decided to close the refugees and isolate them in the camps. They even prohibited the children of the refugees to go to the school. They make them real ghettos, reminding the period that the Nazis were closing the Jews in ghettos of Warsaw and so on. So against all of this policy, against all of these racist exclusions, the movement in Greece is responding, is fighting back the working class movement and the anti-racist movement. So when the government decided to build huge detention centers in the islands on February 2028, they announced that they will start. A local strike in Lesbos Island and in Chios Island attracted thousands of demonstrators. They fought 3 days with the police. The government was defeated, and they retreated this plan. On 26th of June, 1 month after the Black Lives Matter movement exploded in the United States, KEERFA called a demonstration under the slogan, Black Lives Matter, Refugee Lives Matter. Open the borders, refugees are welcome. Thousands demonstrated on 26th of June, and especially young workers from Bangladesh. Over 2,000 or 3,000, it was their condition, chanting, we need paper and we need amnesty. We are not criminals, give us paper now. And all this movement continue. And as we are moving now to the International Day of 20 of March, we're very confident that thousands of workers and the young students, they will join this demonstration. Why? Because government, the Greek neoliberal government is a racist government, but it is also a government that it is inside a great scandal of covering sexual abuse against actresses in this country. It's a great political crisis of the government. The union of artists is a strong union and attracted thousands of demonstrators against the government. And at the same time, we have huge struggle in the hospitals, huge struggle in the schools. All of these struggles are supporting the refugees. The teachers' union is calling for the registration of all children of refugees now in the school for no exclusion. The hospital workers' union is calling for immediate vaccination and not exclusion from the vaccine of the refugees. The people who are working in the hotels, they are saying use the hotels for the refugees, for the homeless, and so on. So this is a strong anti-racist movement fighting against the government, fighting against the European Union closing of the border. And we are very proud that we are part of an international movement. We stand with the movement in the United States. We stand up to racism in UK and with the trade unions to make the 20th of March a day of international struggle to demand open the border, refugees are welcome, and we can really stop all this terrible racism. The Black Lives Matter movement opened the way. We are part of this cry. We are part of organizing that a better world is possible, and this world will be with all different people from all religions, from all colors, and racism shall not pass. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Petros, and solidarity greetings from all of us in the UK. And as you've said, the struggle continues, even though you've had fantastic victories over in Greece in terms of against the fascist organisations. Next, we're going to have a video of Francis O'Grady, the TUC General Secretary, and then Wilf Sullivan from the TUC, who is the TUC Race Equality Officer, will then speak. So we'll go over to the video of Francis.
Whatever your race, religion or background, women and men, together we're always stronger as working people, together in a trade union. And I want to bring greetings and solidarity on behalf of the TUC and all our unions to stand up to racism this year of all years, because what a time we have had. We've seen how the pandemic has exposed all those inequalities at work that were always there but have been made so much worse, with Black and ethnic minority people much more likely to lose their job, much more likely to be on low pay and insecure hours like 0 hours contracts, much more likely to work in the gig economy where unions have won a famous victory in the courts, but much less likely to be treated fairly. And the trade union movement, we are determined, is going to use our power to put that right. We've set up a task group 20 years on from the Stephen Lawrence task group, but with Stephen's dad, Neville, as our patron, chaired by the brilliant Patrick Roach, with Gloria Mills, the chair of our Race Equality Committee, also making an incredibly important contribution. And we've set ourselves some simple aims. We are going to use our bargaining power to get good agreements. We're going to be out there campaigning, not least for race pay gap reporting. And we're also going to organise, because in the end, we know that only by building the trade union movement will we win. But, you know, the trade union movement has always had a bigger role beyond the workplace too. And of course, ever since that brutal murder of George Floyd, we've seen how that sparked protests, not just in the United States, but Black Lives Matter protests all around the world. And George, of course, is not the only one to have been murdered in that way. And the United States is not the only country where that injustice happens. We've also seen those events on Capitol Hill with pro-Trump supporters carrying white supremacist flags, spreading poisonous ideas from the far right, and organising in a very well-funded way online. And that's why we have also committed ourselves to a major initiative to push back against neo-fascist and radical right ideas, and to get organised across borders, because we are an internationalist movement. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us, but I truly believe that the more people who join unions, the more we get active, involved and organised, the more chance we have of winning. And there is no more just cause. As is often said, when Black and ethnic minority people rise, we all rise, because divided we are weak, united we are unstoppable. Solidarity. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Francis, for that video. And I'm going to hand over to Wilf Sullivan now, who's going to speak. He's the TUC Race Equality Officer. Over to you, Wilf.
Thanks, Jane. What I want to do is just say why I think that the 20th of March is so important. And I just want to start off by saying I was born in Britain. I'm part of generations of black workers who have been in Britain for centuries, who have been at the forefront of the struggles for freedom, peace and justice, who have played a key role in the abolition of the slave trade, who were prominent in the Chartist movement. Back in the 1800s, that was the beginning of the organised working class movements in this country and the birth of trade unionism, who have organised in the docks, the textile industry, manufacturing, public services, and have still played prominent roles in the British trade union movement. We were at the heart of the anti-colonial and imperial struggles and recognised that struggles against racism is an international struggle against exploitation and repression. And that's why, actually, I've always been very proud to be able to work from the TUC with Stand Up to Racism since 2014 to build the activity around the UN Day. But so proud that that it's not now just happening in the UK, but that it's happening in many countries across the world, and that we're able to play a role in coordinating and helping coordinate the World Against Racism actions that now take place around that day. But I mean, on a point of reflection, I'd like to go back to why we have this day in the first place. It was 61 years ago tomorrow that 70 people were killed, many women and children, and 18 women standing up to the pass laws in Sharpeville in South Africa. Laws that dictated where you could go, who you could associate with, what services you could receive, and ultimately what your status was in society. It's this event that the United Nations International Day for Elimination of Discrimination was created to commemorate, to serve as a beacon and show that together, if we stand up and work together and organise, we can change the world. The anti-apartheid regime used fear to divide and rule. To be able to exploit black workers, to be able to and to be able to repress black workers, and to get the rest of the population in South Africa to buy into that agenda. 60 years on, internationally and in Britain, we see the same tactics being used. The hostile environment, highlighted by the Windrush scandal, where people lost their homes and livelihoods, and some were deported because they couldn't show the right papers to prove they were British. We see the ramping up of deportations by this government, but it's been going on for a long time, of people who have lived in this country for most of their lives being put on planes and put into situations where they have no income or no family and support and no hope. The refusal to respect the basic rights of the asylum seekers, highlighted by the recent fire at Napier Barracks in Kent, where there's no proper medical facilities, even in the midst of a pandemic, no heating, no proper food. And what did Priti Patel have the audacity to do? To try and justify that on the basis that the mistreatment of asylum seekers was justified, because if they were given more generous conditions, that would undermine public confidence in the asylum system. When the government minister, Kemi Badenoch, says that actually efforts to root out racism in British society are creating a prison for black people by politicising their skin colour. It's the politics of divide and rule. I'd like to say to Kemi Badenoch, we already live in a prison. We live in a prison caused by racism, which defines us to the margins of society, which confines us to poverty, and which subjects us to repression. And for me, the killing of George Floyd was a signal, was a symbol of the neck that's been on black people for centuries. And this has got to change. But I just don't want to be negative about it, because I'm an idealist. I'm a socialist and I'm an idealist. And I'm fighting for change. I want to get rid of this morally, politically and bankrupt world that we live in, where actually we all suffer to make a few people rich. In this current situation, we can't give in to the politics of fear. I want to see a world where everybody has a roof over their head, where everybody has decent clothes on their back, where everybody has access to good education and healthcare, and where nobody has to move because the environment in their country is being trashed by multinationals for profit. I want a world where my children and grandchildren can be treated with dignity and respect. And I'm going to finish. I just want to finish with actually quoting the words of Haile Selassie's speech to the United Nations in 1963. Many of you will know these words because they were popularised by Bob Marley, but they're important to remember that until the philosophy which holds one race superior to another is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, that until there is no longer first class and second class citizens of any nation, until the colour of a man's skin is no more significant than the colour of his eyes, and until the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race, that until the dream of lasting peace of world citizenship and the rule of international normality will remain a fleeting illusion to be pursued but never attained. Well, I want that world of peace. I want that world of morality. I believe that together we can achieve that. Where we can achieve a world where my children and grandchildren can live in dignity, in a world where there's only one race, the human race. And the UN Day, organising around the UN Day, gives us an opportunity to strengthen our international movement, to stand together to fight for a better world. Because one day we have to achieve a world where when the sun rises, no matter what people's skin colour, what their ethnic origin, they can say, today is a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Wilf. Excellent contribution. Just want to read a few comments out that are coming into the chat box from Carla. Shocking to hear what's happening in Greece, but heartening to hear what KEERFA are organising and the teaching unions are doing. We've also got other comments from Sarah. The courage of ordinary people to face down racism coming from the top of society is inspiring. It can make us all braver. Liz says, yes, Shaka, seeing George being murdered in front of us brought all our collective trauma to the surface, but not one British copper has been charged with death in police custody in Britain. And another one from Jeff. Thank you, Stand Up to Racism and all the speakers and participants. Solidarity to you all from the branch Bassa Unite. And as I say, keep putting in chat box any comments, any links you think are relevant. They go in the chat box and I can read some more out. We've still got plenty of speakers to go. So I'm going to hand over to Daniel Kebede. He's the NEU president. And obviously, congratulations to the NEU for their continued fight against the government and to make sure that our schools are safe, not only for teachers and the people who work in there, our educators, but also for the families. Okay, over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's really good to be with you all here today, actually. We've got some really key battles to fight, haven't we? And I just want to actually start by talking about Shamima Begum. I'm a teacher. That's what I do full-time. That's my day job. And with incidents of radicalization and so on, these are safeguarding issues. These are concerns, you know, for educators, and we try to deal with them with some compassion and obviously very, very seriously. But yesterday we saw the High Court rule that the government is fine and justified with stripping her British citizenship. And I think that should be a warning shot to everybody who is a child of a migrant. If they can take away her citizenship, they can take away ours. And I just want to focus in a little bit on her case. She was a 15-year-old girl who was groomed online and went to Syria. You know, I do not condone her actions at all, but we must recognize that at the time she was a child. And even if her views have not changed, as from a 15-year-old girl to now. She should be dealt with here in her place of birth, not left in a refugee camp in Syria. It is a complete disgrace the way the British state has acted, you know, and it's thoroughly racist. When we learn of, you know, far-right teenagers who are white going to Russia to their training to be radicalized further, you know, we don't ever hear of their citizenship being stripped. And in fact, I know of a foreign-born national who is responsible for thousands of deaths, and it isn't Shamima Begum, it is Boris Johnson, who was born in New York City and is responsible for the thousands of deaths of UK citizens here. So I think as a trade union movement, we do really need to sound the alarm of the actions of the British state. But it has been quite a year in the fight against racism, hasn't it? And the brutal murder of George Floyd was a lightning rod to anti-racists around the world. And what we have seen is a mass mobilization of the anti-racism movement over the past 12 months that we need to continue. We need to continue that struggle. So as Wilf said, I'm not being negative, I'm incredibly positive when I'm hearing of thousands of people in Derbyshire, black and white, stood together, united, calling for Black Lives Matter. It warms my heart. It was fantastic in the northeast where I live, cities and towns across the world, across the country and the world, in fact, standing up and saying, no, we want a better deal for Black lives. And coming out of the COVID crisis, we're going to have to continue that fight because Black communities have borne the brunt of it, haven't they? They have been more likely to contract COVID, more likely to die from COVID, not because of genetic predispositions as the government were trying to put out at first, but because, you know, Black people are more likely to live in poverty, more likely to be on frontline jobs, and more likely to suffer racism in the workplace. And our trade unions have to be central to that fight for a better deal for Black communities and white communities as well, because when Black workers win, I fundamentally believe that white workers win as well. So let's continue on in that struggle. Black and white stood together, united in the fight against racism. And education will continue to be a battleground in the fight against racism. There's no doubt about it, whether it's opposition to the prevent agenda, whether it's the battle for an anti-racist curriculum, for decolonization and colonial struggles to be taught to all children, the history of slavery to be taught with some historical accuracy. Education will continue to be that battleground. And I do want to just say we need to keep standing in solidarity with the Bristol Four, the Colston Four, because, you know, that day they put that statue into the harbour, they taught this nation more about slavery than the British schools ever do. So let's continue to stand in solidarity with them. But thank you very much for having me here, Jane, and thank you. It's very good to see Weyman healthy and fighting still. So solidarity, everyone.
Thank you, Daniel, and solidarity to you. A couple of more comments coming in. Francis is right. A young man just walking home in Kilcoddy. Shaka was killed by the police, wounds all over his body. A witness has come forward, but no justice for his family yet. Also from Safia, thank you, Francis. I can't be said often enough, standing up against racism is purpose that serves the wider community, Black and white. Pauline, hi to Margaret Greer, greetings from the sunny East Anglia. I'm still fighting the good fight within Unison and the TUC. So thanks, Pauline. Maxine, yes, Wilf, we need a better society and a world for all. Judy Cox, well said, Daniel. It's a safeguarded issue. And Winston Richards says, that was such a profound contribution. The fear for his family is experience we can identify with. This is the reality of the current climate. So keep those comments in. You can read them obviously yourselves, but we can pick them up for also our speakers. Our next speaker is going to be Elise Bryant. She's United Against Hate activist in the United States. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Elise. Thank you, Elise, and over to you.
Thank you, Jane. I am a union woman, just as strong as I can be. I do not like the bosses and the bosses don't like me. I want to thank you all. Thanks to Julie Sherry from the National Office of Stand Up to Racism for reaching out and inviting me to join with my UK cousins and cousins from around the world on this great panel. I'm sure you all are with me when I say, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. Hello, sisters, brothers, siblings, comrades, family. I bring you greetings on behalf of my siblings in the DC Metro United Against Hate, an alliance of union and non-union workers from a variety of social justice organizations. I also give thanks and honor to the First Nations people, the indigenous people of this land whose land was stolen from them, the land on which I stand. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. And you've heard that from my sister, brother, sibling panelists who've gone before me. And that's why on March 20th, 2021, we will join with our allies around the world to defeat racism and fascism in every corner of the globe. In our masks here in the United States, still social distancing because over 500,000 people have died due to the continuing pandemic in this country. As my brother John Foremost once said, it's gonna take us all to make a change, take us all to win the peace. It's gonna take us all in the streets. It's gonna take us all. It's gonna take us all. If there ever was a time that tested the experiment of democracy in the United States, it was the last 4 years of the Trump presidency. A presidency that, as folks have said before me, ended with an attack on the Congress of the United States by domestic terrorists carrying banners of white supremacy and fascism. A first in the history of the United States Capitol, but not in the lives of black people in this country. We have survived domestic terrorist attacks on a daily basis for over 400 years. America, the beautiful, turned ugly in the eyes of the world when we watched George Floyd, a black mother's son, who died as we witnessed a white police officer hold his knee against Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. 8 minutes, the time I had to deliver this message. Trump is out of the White House, but there is still obviously an alarming rise of the far right of hate crimes in the United States. We in the states, labor movement, know it's essential to come together and build the broadest movement possible that's multiracial, geographically diverse, and as workers, union and non-union, front and center in building an anti-racist movement. The brilliance of the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests, as many of us said on the panel already, showed the power that such a multiracial movement has, and that we can create real change only by coming together. I wept when I saw the protesters kneel on the pavement of Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C., a block from the White House, for 8 minutes. I looked at those black, brown, and white faces of the old and the young, the families of all color, queer activists waving rainbow flags, native and foreign-born, together reflecting the diversity of America and the backbone of democracy, which is the union and the labor movement as far as I'm concerned. As president of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, I am also proud of the anti-racism work of the constituent groups of the American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrial Organizations, whose building now has a banner that hangs 7 stories that says Black Lives Matter. For the A. Philip Randolph Institute, Pride at Work, Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, Labor Council of Latin American Advancement, and the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, the labor movement in the United States has been forced to look at racism in our own ranks, to deal with the police unions, and to put a real effort into the work of anti-racism training. Leaders and members are learning that race is a political construct that the ruling class has created to divide the working class for generations here in this country and around the world. As Ralph Chaplin wrote, we have nothing in common with the greedy parasites. They divide us by our color. They divide us by our tongue. They divide us men and women. They divide us old and young. but they'll tremble at our voices when they hear these verses sung. For the union makes us strong. We're working together with our central labor councils here in the States to join in United Against Hate, and we invite you to join us for Labor Against Hate, the role of workers in standing against white supremacy on March 6th. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. The union brought my family up and out of poverty. Together with workers all around the world, we will use the power of global solidarity to strengthen an anti-racist, anti-fascist movement in the United States, fortified and lifted by the work that is being done in other countries. We are the power of the many, and there are more of us than there are of them. I'm inspired by all that I've heard today, and I'll close by saying, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. In the name of all those whose shoulders we stand, for our children and our children, peace, power, love, the unstoppable force.
Absolutely fantastic, Elise. What a voice, what passion, what inspiration. You know, if you ever want to get a tonic on life, especially in a lockdown, invite Elise onto any of these Zoom calls. What an absolute fantastic contribution. I cannot sing, I will not choose to sing, but I know I can be loud and chant on every demonstration I'm on. Solidarity, sister, and take our love and solidarity back to the USA. Oh, well, the next person has got something to follow. It's Margaret Greer. She's not next speaker. She's Unison National Race Equality Officer. So over to you, Margaret.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues, comrades, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for inviting me to say a few words at the Stand Up to Racism TUC Trade Union Conference this afternoon. But before I start, as is tradition with me, I'd like to take a moment of reflection. I would like to offer my sincere condolences to all the families who have lost loved ones during this pandemic, a moment of remembrance and silence to those that have paved the way for us to be here today, and those that are still suffering enslavement and oppression across the world. As we remember the victims of Grenfell, the Me Too movement, that we all know that Black Lives Matter, and so we remember Stephen Lawrence, Ricky Reel, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and all the Black people murdered just because they were Black. So let us please take a moment. Thank you. When defining Black, I'll be using a political term when I refer to our struggles in the broader context, but recognize that BAME is in full use across many sectors. From COVID-19 to Black Lives Matter, fighting anti-racist workplace discrimination to disproportionate deaths and challenging institutional racism, Black workers, their lives and livelihoods should be of paramount importance to all in our union. In our trade union work, comrades, how can we continue to work effectively to organize for a world against racism and fascism and build towards the UN Anti-Racism Day of Action on the 20th of March and beyond, when we know that prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance? Leave it alone. Remember, take it off the screen. It's gone too far, please. Remember, when we know that prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Remember, the conqueror writes history. They came, they conquered, and they write. You don't expect people who came to invade us to tell the truth about us. So that's why I'm no longer talking to white people about racism. I'm talking to white allies who are prepared to right the wrongs and turn the light of truth upon these injustices with me. Because you see, an activist is someone who cannot help but fight for something. That person is not usually motivated by a need for power or money or fame, but driven by some injustices, some cruelty, some unfairness, so much so that he or she is compelled by some internal moral engine to act to make it better. So when injustices become unbearable, our resistance becomes duty. And I believe that Black history is world history by its own definition. It highlights the highs and lows of all races and their path through history. The marginalization and discrimination faced by Black workers with entrenched barriers, structural, institutional racism would appear to ever be increasing. But Black members' equality or civil rights is not up for debate or deliberation. If we cannot recognize that racism happens every second, minute, hour, day, week, month of every year, then you have not been paying attention. Only tangible action and outcomes will be written and recorded by historians. And so I'm delighted that Unison is working with Stand Up to Racism, the Trade Union Congress and other affiliated unions. As a race equality officer and community activist, my life's work is to improve the working lives and defend the rights of all people, their families and their communities, because we know that action always speaks louder than mere words. And the pandemic has amplified structural disparities, entrenched disadvantages and discriminatory practices with shocking and excusable racial bias, delays in carrying out risk assessments and a lack of urgency to take action to protect the lives of Black workers as they care for the lives of others has made racism a public health issue. Because in our fight for freedom, we are dying without justice. So last year, Unison launched its Race for Equality Challenging Racism in the NHS, where many Black NHS staff live with the consequences of racism every day. It's time for a serious conversation about the issues, to be part of the solution, working together in unison to create an NHS that respects and values all staff. In 1948, people came from all over the world to work in the new health service. Now, more than 72 years later, we must not let their legacy be undermined by racism. And if you want further details, they can be found at unison.org.uk/race for equality. We recognise multicultural Britain, that the world is multilingual, has multiple faiths, but it is still a world where racial prejudice and discrimination are everyday occurrences. But in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., when he says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Because in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." So when we are organising for a world against racism and fascism, brothers and sisters, we need to manage it in a way that has courage, purpose, and direction. We need to be bold, we need to be brave, and we need to be focused. Because in the end, the power of the people's voice will be more important than the people in power. So every day from this day to the 20th of March, we use social media platforms. We promote, we leaflet where we can, sending the message that we are on the move in unison and we shall not be moved. And so it is time we all come together and stand up against all forms of racism, injustices, and defend the rights of all people. With the summer protest of Black Lives Matter, coupled with the recent tragic events of insurrection of white supremacist and far-right groups on the 6th of January in America. But did you notice how many got out alive? It would appear that the system doesn't want racism to end, it just wants you and me to stop talking about it. But now is not the time to hide behind the narrative that we are not as bad as America, because therein lies the problem. This is not an American problem, but a global one, and Britain is not immune. You see, I will not be shamed in believing that my Blackness makes me unequal, that my Blackness will determine my life sentences. And so we must reinforce our stance that we challenge the politics of hate, we affirm our commitment to speaking out, standing up and saying, no more to racism, no more to sexism, no more to fascism, anti-Semitism. We will continue to challenge, campaign for our civil rights despite the obstacles put in front of them. We know that racism is not dead, but international solidarity includes the fight for the right to life, justice, and freedom. And like someone once said, you fall down 7 times, you get up 8. And so our young people coming together and leading the way in protest, seeing so many Black, white people of all nations coming together to say enough is so inspiring to me. You see, it's not our job to toughen our children up to face a cruel and heartless world. It's our job to raise children who will make the world a little less cruel and heartless. And so finally, colleagues, comrades, brothers and sisters, if the fight seems too hard and the scale of the opponent looks too great, then remember the struggles that we have already overcome. All the victories over dangerous, powerful men and women have come about because enough people were willing to take a knee and bring our collective strength to bear. So in the words of the late, great civil rights leader, John Lewis, never ever be afraid to make some noise and get into good trouble, necessary trouble, because people may doubt what you say, but will believe what you do by the actions that you take. So remember, all lives cannot matter when Black lives don't appear to matter too. Thank you for listening to me. Stay safe and well, and I'll see you on the 20th of March. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret, for that powerful speech, and obviously your continued struggle against injustices, not only in the workplace, in terms of globally. Excellent speech. We will be running over time by a little bit, so we can ask all the other speakers to remain disciplined, and if people can stay with us online, that'll be brilliant. Our next speaker is Steve Hedley. He's the RMT Assistant General Secretary. Over to you, Steve.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invite to speak here today at this conference. I'm from Ireland, one of the oldest colonies that Britain had, that England had, if you like. And I'm wearing a T-shirt that shows that injustice is still going on today. We've got Irishmen locked up without the ability to go to a jury trial on the information of informers that have taken money. And that's the oppression that's carrying on in the occupied 6 counties of Ireland today. Now, I have to say, when I came to this country over 30 years ago, I was a bit racist myself. I didn't like English people very much. But I found their behaviour improved a lot when I stopped throwing things at them. But seriously, we have got a problem with British imperialism. And that British imperialism will take the land, it'll take the wealth of any country, no matter what country, what colour the people in that country are. And it's all right attacking America and other places. We have to deal with imperialism here in this country. And we have to deal with what justified imperialism, which was racism against anybody that the British state wanted to subjugate. Now, I'm a member of the trade union movement. I'm in the RMT. And we in the RMT have played a role, I think a leading role, in the fight against racism and fascism in this country. We had members who went off to Spain to fight fascism. We had members at Cable Street. They were NUR, NUS members. That those unions merged to become the RMT. We had members standing at Lewisham, at Wood Green. And just recently, we had members at Whitechapel when the ADL tried to come down there. And of course, we were famously attacked, including myself, by some fascist thugs who came off a bit worse for wear when they attacked us recently in a Stand Up to Racism demonstration. But I oppose racism and discrimination in any form, because any racism and discrimination is actually anti-working class. Because the ruling elite, the ruling class who benefit from this capitalist system, love nothing better than to sow division amongst working people. They'll divide us because of race or sexuality or gender or nationality or anything else, sex even. And they'll try to scapegoat people for the inequalities in society, which they themselves are responsible for. And that's why on a class basis, we have to oppose racism. Now, we've seen in Britain a kind of an echo of what's going on in America with Trump. I wouldn't say Boris Johnson is simply an add-on to Donald Trump, but in a lot of ways, he parodied what was happening in America. He tried to be that populist right-wing current when he first came into power. Of course, he criticized Muslim women, called them letterboxes and bank robbers. Could you imagine, for example, if Jeremy Corbyn had have made similar comments? He would have been absolutely pilloried in the press, and quite rightly so. But Boris Johnson had very, very mild criticism. He called black people grinning pickaninnies, and he called gay people bum boys. And that's the Prime Minister of Britain. And when that's the message from the top, it's no wonder that fascists and racists are getting an echo out there in our communities and sometimes in our trade unions. And I think what the whole Black Lives Matter thing did was they highlight it's not just a fight against racism in another country. It's a fight against racism and the hangover of British imperialism in this country. It's shocking, isn't it, to think that we could have statues to slavers, people who kidnapped people, murdered them. Many, many died. Many hundreds of thousands of people died when they were being transported in these slave ships. And we would put up a monument to such people because they made a bit of money out of it. What an absolute disgrace. And I'm absolutely proud to say that we had people down at Bristol as well as a union when that statue was toppled into the water where it belongs. So what can we do as unions to fight racism and fascism today? Well, I think first of all, we can't be silenced. Some in the Labour Party would say that any criticism of the Israeli state is now taboo. You can't criticize the Israelis murdering the Palestinians because somehow that is anti-Semitic. Not at all. You've got many fine Jewish people who stand up and criticize the Israeli state when they're attacking the Palestinians and murdering the Palestinians. You have people out there who say that the Palestinians shouldn't have a right to return. The same people, by the way, are arguing for new borders all over the world. So we have to watch the Trojan horses within our own movement. But what we can't forget is the oppression that's going on in Ireland, still going on in Ireland. People being locked up without the right to jury trial. Innocent men and women being imprisoned just because of their political point of view. And we have to take that on and fight that because we are living in the belly of the beast. We are in the heart of the British system, the British state, and that's our duty to fight that as well. So I think our task is twofold. First of all, we have to educate as trade unions. We're not just bodies who go out and get decent terms and conditions for people. We have to educate. And we have to explain that the ruling class want to divide us in order to make us weaker, and we're stronger together. We also have to have stewarding groups, I believe, to make sure if our demonstrations are attacked by these fascists, then those attacks are repelled. But ultimately, it comes down to this as trade unions. If we're fighting as a trade union for working class people, that's for all working class people. If we're collaborating with the bosses and going into pacts about social partnership and refusing to fight, then that's giving the racists power, because the racists can then turn around and say, well, it's that black person's fault that I haven't got a job, or it's that Asian person's fault that I haven't got a house, or it's that Irish person's fault that I've got to wait in the queue for something for the NHS. And of course, the reality is it's the system's fault. The system is not invested in the NHS, not invested in housing, not invested in jobs. And it's a trade unions movement, not just to highlight that. It's our responsibility not just to highlight that, but they actually fight against it. So I hope we don't have an absolute capitulation like we had the last time from the TUC, when the recession, when the banks went belly up and they were bailed out, they bailed tunes of trillions of pounds. Working class people are not responsible for the pandemic. We are not responsible for the mishandling of a pandemic and over 100,000 deaths in this country. And working class people should not pay the price. And if the TUC are not prepared to lead a movement, then what we have to do is put together a coalition of unions that are willing to take action, coordinate that action, and fight for the whole working class, and in so doing undermine the fascists and the racists. Solidarity, comrades.
Solidarity, Steve. Thanks very much. Looking forward to continue working with you over the coming year as well. Got a few comments that have come in from Shahina. Racism is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Well said, Margaret. Sophia, Elise, Bryant, what a treat. She was superb. Loved the inspiring singing, insight, courage and solidarity. Rhoda, this one's for you, Steve Hedley. Fantastic fighter for workers' rights and against the far right. And they're just a few comments that are coming through. Right, our next speaker is the General Secretary of the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union. It's Sarah Woolley. And following Sarah Woolley, we've got two more speakers and then we'll wrap up the session. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Jane, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today at the closing session of what has been an inspirational, powerful yet emotive days worth of events. Thank you to Stand Up to Racism for the continued important work that you do. And I wanted to speak a bit about, I was watching this morning's opening session and I was incredibly moved by Savannah's contribution, her passion and anger about the whole situation and experience that she has, speaking out on behalf of so many people for whom racism is a daily experience because it is so ingrained in our society and our institutions. It should be a wake-up call to all of us that we aren't doing enough to support our friends, our colleagues, our comrades, our family. In 2021, people should not have to experience what Savannah and Roger were talking about this morning and has been covered again this afternoon. It is frankly disgusting that people think that it is okay to treat someone appallingly because of the colour of their skin, and we need to be better at calling those acts out for what they are and challenging racism, whether in the workplaces, in our communities, or indeed our homes. And Savannah was right. We do need to look at ourselves as a movement. It is easy to blame everyone else. We know in our union, as do others, and Steve touched on it as well, that we have members and even reps that have been drawn into the right-wing rhetoric because they are so good at painting themselves as one of us. They aren't anything like us. They thrive on division and lies and have no intention of embracing diversity and inclusivity, never mind equality. And let me tell you, anyone that thinks it's okay to treat someone differently, treat them negatively because of the colour of their skin, their beliefs, or the country of birth, does not belong in our movement. Using phrases like all lives matter is not helpful, it's not inclusive, it's ignoring the reality of the situation that until Black Lives Matter equally, all lives cannot possibly matter because a huge section of our society is being excluded and treated so differently. It's also easy to bury our heads in the sand when it is not happening to us. I'm fully aware I sit here as a white woman, but as a trade unionist and as a trade union movement, we cannot continue to bury our heads in the sand. And I know there is some fantastic work going on in the movement and beyond. We've heard some examples of that in this session, but it's not enough. The far right still have a grasp on too many people. We need to challenge those that think that it's okay to use derogatory phrases and worse. We need to have the honest, difficult conversations Roger spoke about this morning and empower our reps and our members to have them too. And on that, because I know as a white woman and our national president knows as a white man, we cannot and should not speak about the issues that we think our Black, Asian and ethnic minority members face. We have internally asked one of our experienced full-time officials, Haroon, with the support of our brilliant Vice President Mandy, our first ever Black woman to hold the position, to set up a network of BAME members who have yet to decide how they would like to be collectively referred, who share a history that me and Ian don't, to discuss openly and honestly their thoughts on the union, its structures, the campaigns we run, the issues they face daily in communities and workplaces, so that we as a union can be better. We need to make sure that we truly represent them and that we aren't creating barriers by not truly understanding what they are, because the phrase, well, that's how we've always done it, is not good enough. We are incredibly proud of our diverse membership. We just need to make sure that we are fully reflective of it and that everyone has a voice that is loud and clear throughout the union. I know as a white woman, I cannot ever know the true impact or reality of racism. And as Kevin from the NEU mentioned this morning, we can't call ourselves true trade unionists if we are not anti-racist, and I believe I am. And I want the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union to be an anti-racist trade union. And we'll continue to work on educating our members, challenging those that can't see what they are doing is racist, and can promise that we will deal with those that know and fully understand that our actions are racist and the impact of them. We will work to ensure that our policies and structures are inclusive and empowering, and that our reps are trained and can negotiate on issues that are reflective of the diverse branches they represent. My pledge to you is that I will always stand with you. I will challenge racism and all forms of fascism wherever that may happen. And as a union, we will continue to work with Stand Up to Racism, break down the influence the far right is having by exposing the myths and lies they circulate, and educating our members on the negative impact those organisations have. Ensure that we are organising and campaigning around issues that cover all of our members, embracing and celebrating our diversity. We will continue to fight for better terms and conditions in our industry and for our class, while working together with comrades around the world to improve the lives for everyone and work to drown out the right-wing rhetoric, not just on the March the 20th, but for good. But let's make it the biggest event we can. Because like Francis mentioned a little earlier in her video, together across all races, men and women, we are the people who create change. We are powerful. We are the 99%, trade unionists, socialists, anti-racists. Solidarity.
Excellent, Sarah. Thanks very much. You're bringing change to your organisation, and actually that will bring change to other organisations as well, as they are exposed in terms of, in some ways, not moving issues forward quick enough, not having given access into our structures. So well done, Sarah. And I look forward to working with you throughout the year as well. Okay, our next speaker is Mariam, and she's from the All Black Lives UK. So I'm going to hand over to you, Mariam.
Hi, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone else who has spoken so far. It's been really insightful, and I just really appreciate everyone, what you've all put in. So yeah, my name is Mariam, and I'm with All Black Lives UK. We're a youth-led movement fighting for racial equality and justice for all Black people in the UK. Our goal is to educate people, change mindsets, provide a safe space for the Black community and create an equal future for Black people. So far on our social media pages, we've released things like infographics, for example, topics such as overt versus covert racism, police statistics from all different kinds of places in the UK, such as the Midlands, racist buzzwords. It's all about really just educating people on the specifics and things that, might seem like, oh, it's just a joke, or do you know what I mean? Things like that, and actually teaching people how, no, it is racist. And, because you might find it a certain way, actually people are offended by that. So yeah, in 2020, we managed to expand, from London. Of course, the brutal murder of George Floyd, may he rest in peace, ignited a fire in all of us, and I'm sure a lot of people, as you all saw, around the world. So yeah, in 2020, we actually managed to expand from London. We had our protest in Bristol, which I'm sure you're all aware of, where people at that protest obviously put the Colston statue in the river. We managed to do protests in Birmingham. We did a few in Manchester, and we're just looking to expand some more. We've actually recently been granted, which was the information was released last week. BLM has releasing some funding to some organisations across the UK, including us. So now we're going to be able to really put in place the plans that we've had for this year, hopefully. Well, we are watching, obviously, the guidelines and recommendations from the government quite closely to see what we can do. But a speaker earlier had mentioned about there being this mindset of, America this, America this, but no, really there is a battle in the UK, and we've seen that, and we've experienced that, and we've been through that. And I think that our organisation, the fact that we are all, I think the oldest person in our organisation is 24, 25. And I think us being so young, our youngest is, I think, 17. So, I think that young people feel like their voices can be heard and they have a platform with us. I think they're comfortable speaking around us, and they have that confidence to be able to share their stories, because we do create a safe space for the Black community, a young Black community, and we make a point of letting people know, and the Black community being aware that we support all Black lives, no matter who you are, what gender you identify as, anything. We are here for you. You have a voice with us, and we are fighting for you. We are fighting for your equality. Another thing is we have, our demands that we were putting out in summer, which to begin, the first one is commit to ending racial discrimination in the criminal justice system. As I said, we've released infographics on that. The second one is substantially reform the education system. Slavery, colonization, things like that, they are also white history. They are also history of other people. You need to be aware of exactly what happened, not the history that is chosen and carefully selected to be taught to you, but you need to understand exactly what happened so that you can understand, try to understand. Of course, it's all about really just trying and actually committing to being able to try your hardest to understand, because me not being a Black person, I will never understand from personal experience, and I've had the privilege to be able to learn about racism, not via personal experiences. So I like, do you know what I mean? So we try to speak on that too. A third one is commit to ending racial health disparities. Why are Black women, I think it's 5 times more likely to die during childbirth than any other race? Things like that. It's just horrible and awful, and we need to close that gap. The fourth one is to implement recommendations of reviews already undertaken by the government. For example, Windrush Lesson Learned Review, the LAM Review, things like that. There's one thing to say that there are reviews, it's under review and all of this, but then it's another thing to actually put that into action and commit to the plans that you have shared with the rest of the UK. And our fifth one is standing with the Black community in the US. Of course, that is very important to us, because as much as we do have to target racism in the UK and address that, we do want everyone to be aware that we stand in solidarity with America as well. And yeah, I just think that, it's really, I think what happened in summer at the beginning of June last year, really, it did ignite it was something that was different to before, because of the video being so graphic as well, and people being able to watch that. And I just think that it touched so many different people that, we have a saying now that this isn't just a moment, it's a movement. We want action, and that's what we demand, and that's what we are working towards having. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I think I've said everything that I came here to say today. I look forward to hearing everyone else's speech. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Miriam. Excellent speech. And you are so right. We're all part of a movement. We're not a moment, we're a movement, and we're going to win. Right, just a couple of comments before the final speaker. Right, we've had a question. How can the TUC, other than the fact my screen's just flicked over? Right, comment, how can the TUC empower individuals who are targeted in places but cannot mobilise their colleagues to stand in solidarity and take class action? That was from Maxine. Martin says, Sarah, thank you for your heartfelt honesty. Sophia, thank you, Steve. So important to be reminded of the historical links with imperialism and colonialism. Past informs the present. That is why we cannot forget. Okay, they were the final comments that I'm going to raise now. And our final speaker is Weyman Bennett, a Stand Up to Racism convener. But it is nice to see Weyman, because this is his first Zoom call since being in hospital. He is a fighter over racism and fascism, and I've known him for over 30 years of my life. But I must admit, we stop scaring us and leaving us wishing to make sure that you're not fighting for your life anymore. So thank you. I'm pleased you're here, Weyman, and I'm going to hand over to you. And much love on your recovery as well. Over to you, Weyman.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me, but I want to start off exactly where Jane left off. And I want to start off with solidarity and condolences to the CWU for the loss of our brother and our sister, Jerry LeConte, who was from North London, who died of CW, who was a CW World postal worker. Because what we must forget, while lockdowns happened, the majority of the people that have died have been working class, and disproportionately Black people have died. And the reason why I mentioned Jerry, because he died last month, was he was relatively young. And we have to understand that when they talk about 120,000 people dying, behind those statistics are real people, are real lives being destroyed. And what we have to do is remember the dead and fight for the living. Remember the dead and fight for the living and give voices to them. Because what happens to working class people is that they're forgotten. Frederick Douglass said that they use racism to divide each, to conquer both. And he's somebody who fought against the abolition. By the way, in this country, they were sending soldiers to Canada in order to back up the question of slavery, while the workers were fighting, while they were doing the cotton struggle, the Black and white workers were fighting to say that they should overcome slavery. There's always been two sides. There's always been a question about where you stand. In America, there's been 500,000 people who've died. And I tell you something, when I was in the ITE unit and I was watching people die, I tell you, when you looked across them, the majority of people who were dying were educators, were workers. And the people that were saving your life, by the way, had come from everywhere. They were Polish, they were Black, they were Pakistani, they were African. The person, my consultant, was an African consultant. Thank you for saving my life, whatever it is. But I want to say this because the Tories were trying to destroy the National Health Service. Remember that? They were trying to destroy it. And then they're congratulating themselves for the fact they didn't get away with it because we stopped them. And so we should understand this, right? Nothing has ever been given to us. Nothing. Frederick Douglass says that power concedes nothing without a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a struggle. Everything we've got, the women speaking here fought for their rights to get it through the suffragettes movement. Ain't I a woman? That's the cry that came out from America. The question of our struggle has been governed because we were not given it. Everything has been fought for. May mention William Cuffrey, the Chartist movement. William Cuffrey was a Black trade unionist who fought with Irish trade unionists as well. And actually my experience of coming to struggle has been, that's the reason why that we've always had this slogan. We've always said against racism, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. We've always understood, again, what Frederick Douglass is, the way they use racism is to try and divide us in order to conquer both of us. And they don't do it equally, but we have to understand this. That's the constant battle, we face. There's something called public health in England, and it said healthcare differentials in terms of life expectancy are due to the question of institutional racism and the different experiences of this. Why do I say this? My mother, who's 79, is in Jamaica. She was a nurse in this country for many years and a social worker in this country. You know what she told me? She said across the Caribbean, there's been 2,500 deaths. She told me that more Jamaicans have died in Britain than have died inside there. Now you can talk about standard deviation, maybe there's data differences, but how do you explain the differences? How do you explain that the supposed first world can say to the rest of the world, well, how do you explain those differences? What are those institutional differences that make a difference? And that question is of class. Class and racism combined together has had a devastating, but it's also a way of us beginning to fight back. The criminal justice system, somebody's already mentioned what happened to Sumaya Begum. There was another 13-year-old young man that was involved in terrorism and Nazi politics. And they said, they came up and said he should go to jail for 24 months. I'm not suggesting the criminal justice system is the solution. He didn't go to jail at all. They said he shouldn't do it because they said he was a child that had been groomed and misdirected. Why isn't Sumaya Begum given the same thing? Our Prime Minister sniffed cocaine, as well as somebody who wanted to be Prime Minister, Michael Gove, sniffed half of Peru up his nose, yeah, and apologized for it. He said in a very nice, I'm really sorry. So sorry that I did this, yeah? I'd like to be the Prime Minister. Could you imagine any Black person going up in jail? Yes, my lord, I've been caught with cocaine and crack. I'm so sorry. I'd like to apologize. Would you like this in Latin or patois or French? Would you let me go? No, you wouldn't. Disproportionate sentence. You go to jail if you're caught with anything like that. Especially if you admitted it yourself. you definitely go to jail. So we have this double standard all the time of so-called justice given by these very people that tell us we should be hard on crime. Did you hear Priti Patel say that? I think my minister ought to go in jail. I'm tough on crime. She didn't say a word. She didn't say a word because she defends her class as well. And Priti Patel is there because black women fought for the right of women to be treated equally. But how has she used that power? She's used that power in actually to attack other people. We should understand that. At the moment, we've got people that use the position they have to attack rights. Bennett, you know, we've got people, they've actually promoted black people in order to put forward racism. And so we have to understand that's a new feature that's taken place before. There's a class of people that are in that position and they're doing that. And that's the reason why she says she's opposed to the Black Lives Matter. She's called the Black Lives Matter movement a disgrace. So if you say Black Lives Matter, it's a disgrace. What's the opposite of saying Black Lives Matter? It's that you're actually saying Black lives don't matter. That's why you're saying it. I am proud that when you saw the most inspiring movement of people coming out onto the streets came out since the civil rights movement. I went to Michael Brown's funeral in the United States. I went to Ferguson. And I remember being depressed afterwards because I thought, how can you murder a child and get away with it? When is this ever going to change? The most important thing is that a multiracial movement led by black generals stormed the streets. And actually what it did, was a challenge to people like Trump. And as somebody said this already, could you imagine if the Black Lives Matter movement had tried to storm Capitol Hill? Do you think they would have got anywhere inside there if they came up the steps or whatever it is? There's a man, there are people that have murdered, in Charleston, a man murdered churchgoers, right? He came out and the police put a bulletproof jacket around him because they said he must be safe. Let alone if somebody walks in with a spear and a machine gun and tries to charge down Capitol Hill. There'd have been a massacre. There would have been a massacre even if they hadn't tried to get there. This is absolutely tells us that those people haven't disappeared. There's a councilwoman inside Congress who said that Jews had started the forest fires by firing lasers into the forest. So it's not to do with global climate warming, it's to do with the question of Jews in power. Soros was secretly behind it. These anti-Semites are right in deep in the heart of the Republican Party. Has anybody said a word? Did Priti Patel say a word? Did Boris Johnson just about condemned it? Just about condemned it after giving the man a state opening when he came here with the royal family, Donald Trump. Power concedes nothing without a fight. And I think what we have to understand when we look at what people have achieved across Europe and across in any kind of fight, what we have to understand is that the heart of it has always been the trade union movement. I remember being about 12 years old, marching inside Wood Green to Black and White Unite and Fight. And these Nazis came down there, tried to chase us out of town. It was the trade union movement. I was actually with Jeremy Corbyn at the time, actually was one of the organizers. But as a school kid, I remember people fighting back. At the heart of that has always been the trade union movement. I've seen several movements, the National Front. And I'm sick and tired of people telling me there's nothing British. You know, like I've been told that the danger of fighting racism, you become an extremist. That's what Priti Patel is. You're an extremist, yeah? Of course, we're extremists in favor of defending democracy. We're extremists in favor of defending women's rights. We're extremists in favor of defending the right of people to choose their own sexuality. We're extremists against racism. It's not extremist. Actually, there's Martin Luther King wrote a letter from Birmingham. And what he said is a danger. He said there's a danger of moderation. He goes, there's a danger of moderation. And why did he say it? He said that the 14th Amendment had been passed 150 years and black people hadn't had rights yet. So the question of waiting and being moderate doesn't work. You have to fight, you have to resist if you want change. So what I'd like to say is what has actually worked? What got rid of the BNP? I've got to shut up now, and I will shut up by saying this. On the 20th of March, we need UN Anti-Racism Day, all of us to come together. And I tell you what makes a difference is there are many more of us than there are of them. Somebody has said before. There's a man called Shelley, he said, rise like lions when you're faced with people that oppose you, because there are many more of us than there are of them. But the heart of this is a question of how working class people, black and white, come together to make sure that we're not divided and that those people that try and maintain the system in terms of the level of inequality overcome. That's where our hope lies. That's where we've always got change, and that's the tradition that we stand in. And I tell you, all the speakers have spoke better than me today. Put it down to an addled mind of COVID, right? But I tell you one thing, right? I'm so proud that we belong to a mass movement. It's not about just people at the top. The truth of it is, it's a mass movement and our numbers that change the world. And everybody out there is a leader. And when we have many more leaders than them, we've got to be better than Boris Johnson and Trump, whatever it is. That's one thing we can congratulate ourselves on. And I'm going to shut up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Weyman. Thanks, Weyman. Excellent contribution. There's been a flurry of well wishes to you as well. You are back on form in terms of the sharpness of your debate, but you haven't changed in terms of running over your time allocated. Right? Just to say, it's now our time to deliver. We have to deliver the 20th of March. If we're out on the streets, we'll deliver safely distanced demonstrations, but there's loads of things we can be doing. In terms of the TUC and all our leaders in the trade union movement, give your branches the ammunition and the information to build the 20th of March. Make sure there's events in every locality that they know about. Link up together. Deliver it. And as I said when I opened, fighting racism and fascism isn't just for one day, but what it can do is build within the movement and move us on and make sure that we fight for the next 12 months on everything we need to, whether that's out in the streets, whether that's in the courts, whether that's in our schools, making sure things are right. The struggle is there and we're part of it. And united, we will win. So thanks, everyone. It's been an absolute excellent event, excellent afternoon. Speakers are great. I feel empowered, and I'm sure everyone else does. Have a good weekend and see you throughout the week. Solidarity, comrades. Solidarity to everyone. The struggle is all our struggle.